So in an emergent curriculum, we're thinking about inquiry as something that is living. It's not a destination necessarily that we have to get to or a prescribed outcome, but more so it's a process of following concepts as they emerge. Or as Cristina Delgado Ventimiglia would say, it's about opening up processes and thinking through generative ideas. Sylvia says that this is a process of drawing attention to, settling into, dwelling in, and experimenting with ideas, stories, problems, and processes at hand. And drawing on Anna Singh, a feminist anthropologist, she considers inquiry as a way of paying attention that thinks in an encounter, in an event, and without blueprints, where pedagogy is emergent and it lingers in moments where unpredictable encounters transform us. Yet with this said, inquiry does not mean that anything goes or that we can disengage and rely only on environments and materials to sort of be the educator. The role of the educator in an emergent curriculum is very different in this context, as we're not only following the child or allowing the child to move freely through the environment without tension. Educators must be intricately involved and bring their processes to this work. So the educator is a co-researcher alongside children. It's not only about the child, but of course the child is a huge part of it as the educational protagonist. But here educators are also intentional collaborators, co-researchers, and artists in some way, who move beyond preconceived knowledge, who move between experimentation and intentionality with children. So in this way, educators are organizing for emergence. They're highly prepared. They're intentional in how they curate spaces and how they make particular decisions in inquiry processes. So the way in which inquiry is conceptualized in an emergent curriculum is purposeful, careful, and its longevity requires a sustained attention. And Sylvia Kind writes that this is a dance, a choreography, where the tensions of staying in a moment, or staying in movement, and the desire to settle somewhere sort of propel the work. So last week we considered what it means to ask a feminist question, how we might pay attention, notice, question, and respond to the worlds in which we live as a pedagogical endeavor. And we're beginning to think about how this might take shape in early childhood spaces. So as we move forward in the course, we're thinking about how we're orienting ourselves into an ethos that will sustain our pedagogical commitments and our idea of what education is for. So we use the term ethos, and I'm borrowing this from the Early Childhood Pedagogies Collaboratory. We use the term ethos to specify, as Van Duren and Rose suggest, broad ways of doing and approaching pedagogies. Following an interest in diversifying practices, in diverse modes of engagement, entanglement, and co-becoming, is to avoid stagnation, to open up to the distinct and multiple ways of thinking and doing early childhood education, and to welcome unintended happenings. If we're considering that the worlds in which we're living are uncertain and unpredictable, then our ethos in education is welcome to unintended happenings. So these ethos are crafted to point that some worlds are more livable than others, and that we make choices about which ones we might craft in the process of enacting our early childhood pedagogies. So this is how the Early Childhood Pedagogies Collaboratory is conceptualizing what it means to have an ethos in an educational project. And so this ethos, this orientation to pedagogy, can help us to think about what are we going to do in our manifesto? This is the manifesto that's worth 10% of your grade, and it's due towards the end of the term, but we can start thinking about what it means to create a manifesto and to have an ethos now. So when you're thinking about your pedagogical manifesto, you can think about what are your pedagogies committed to? What is your image of the child? What is your image of the educator? And what is your understanding of how knowledge is made? And then sometimes it's also helpful to think about a metaphor to help conceptualize the work. And I'm going to include a link on eLearn for next week for you to consider some examples of pedagogical manifestos, and to help you think more about what those could look like. They can take multiple shapes, but there also is in the assignment descriptions an outline of what should be included. But please do consider, what are your pedagogies committed to? What is your image of the child, your image of the educator, and how you think that knowledge is made. And this pedagogical manifesto should be taking a post-structural reconceptualist orientation to early childhood education. So we're moving beyond developmentalism and we're thinking about pedagogy in this pedagogical manifesto.